He didn't raise his voice. He didn't hesitate. He didn't even look angry. "Get out. We're done." The words landed without drama, which somehow made them heavier. Ava Hart stood just inside the front door, rainwater slipping from the hem of her coat and pooling on the hardwood floor. The baby carrier hooked into her elbow felt heavier than it had an hour ago, heavier than it had in the hospital. Noah was 2 days old. 2 days. His tiny face was still red and creased, his breathing uneven in the way newborns breathe, like they're still negotiating with the world. Ava blinked once, certain she'd misunderstood. "What?" she asked. Tanner Cross stood near the fireplace, one hand wrapped loosely around a glass of whiskey. He was dressed for work tomorrow. Pressed slacks, with coat folded neatly over the back of a chair. He looked composed, prepared, like someone who had already rehearsed this moment alone. "We're done," he repeated. "You need to leave." Ava's body reacted before her mind did. A sharp pull tore through her abdomen as she shifted her weight, the stitches from the emergency C-section screaming in protest. She sucked in a breath through clenched teeth and steadied herself against the wall. "I just got discharged," she said quietly. "The doctor said I shouldn't even be standing for long." Tanner took a slow sip of his drink. "You'll manage." The living room felt unfamiliar in a way she couldn't immediately explain. It was too neat. The throw pillows were arranged with rigid precision. The stack of mail that usually sat untouched on the side table was gone. Their wedding photo, the one where Tanner's arm was around her waist and her head was tilted into his shoulder, had been turned face down. And by the staircase stood 3 black suitcases. Her suitcases. Ava stared at them, her chest tightening. "Are we going somewhere?" she asked, still trying to force logic into the moment. Tanner shook his head once. "You are." Her gaze dropped instinctively to the carrier. Noah stirred, making a small sound, his lips puckering in his sleep. Ava's hand tightened protectively around the handle. "Tanner," she said, her voice shaking now. "This isn't funny. We talked about this baby. We planned this." A woman's voice drifted from the kitchen. "She's still pretending this is a conversation." Ava froze. The kitchen door opened, and Madison Rose stepped into view. Young, polished, confident in the way only someone who hasn't lost much can be. She was wearing Ava's cream cashmere wrap, the one Ava had bought for herself after passing her licensing exam, the one she'd saved for. Madison leaned casually against the doorframe, like she'd already memorized the house. Ava's stomach dropped. "Madison?" she whispered. Madison smiled, slow and thin. "Hi." Ava turned to Tanner, disbelief turning sharp. "Why is she here?" "Because it's over," Tanner said flatly. "And she isn't leaving." The words hit harder than the first ones. Ava shook her head. "I just gave birth to your son." Madison glanced at the carrier with faint irritation. "Is it asleep?" she asked. Ava ignored her. She kept her eyes on Tanner. "That's your child," she said. "You can't just—" "Lawyers will handle custody." Tanner interrupted. "I'm not doing this with a crying baby in the house. I have a major meeting tomorrow." Ava's breath caught. "Your apex meeting?" Tanner's mouth curved slightly, pride breaking through the indifference. "Yes, the apex meeting." She had heard that name 100 times. Apex Holdings. The client Tanner treated like a finish line. The company he believed would finally separate him from what he called a small life. Ava felt something cold settle in her chest. This wasn't sudden. This was scheduled. "Where am I supposed to go?" she asked. "I left you money," Tanner replied. $500. The number echoed in her head. 500, she repeated. "In Seattle? In winter? Tanner, that won't even—" "You'll figure it out," he said. "You always do." Madison laughed softly. "He's right. You're very resourceful." Ava didn't look at her. She refused to give Madison the satisfaction of reaction. But inside, something cracked, not loudly, not completely, just enough to let the truth in. She had made herself smaller for this marriage. She had accepted his dismissals, his impatience, his contempt disguised as ambition. She had believed love meant endurance. "And Noah?" she asked again. "Our son." Tanner checked his watch. That small gesture, checking the time while dismantling her life, felt like the sharpest cut yet. I need sleep, he said. I have a future to secure. Ava swallowed hard. Please, she said, hating the word but using it anyway. Just let us stay 1 week. I'll be in the guest room. I won't bother you. I'm still healing. Madison scoffed. That's embarrassing. Tanner walked toward the suitcases and grabbed the nearest one. He dragged it across the floor. The wheels rattled, loud in the silence. He opened the front door. Cold rain surged inside immediately, sharp and relentless. The porch light turned it into streaks of silver. Ava stood frozen. Tanner, she said, her voice breaking now. Don't do this to a newborn. I can, he said calmly. And I am... He tossed a thick envelope onto the porch. It slid across the wet wood and stopped near her foot. That's $500, he said. Don't come back. The door slammed shut. The sound echoed down the street. Noah woke and began to cry. Ava stood there, rain soaking through her clothes, staring at the door as if it might open if she stared hard enough. It didn't. She bent over the carrier, whispering to Noah, shielding him from the wind with her body. Her hands shook, not from the cold, but from the shock settling into reality. She grabbed the envelope, dragged one suitcase down the steps, and moved because standing still felt like surrender. The bus stop on Elm Street offered little protection. Ava sat on the metal bench, pulling Noah close as the rain battered the shelter. She checked her phone. 12% battery. She scrolled through contacts and found no one. Her mother was gone. Her father had been a ghost. Friends had drifted away quietly, encouraged by Tanner's insistence that they were holding her back. Ava called a women's shelter. We're full tonight, the tired voice said. The storm brought everyone in. She checked her bank account. $47. Tanner had emptied it. Ava closed her eyes, pressing her forehead to the carrier handle as one silent tear slipped down her cheek. Noah's tiny hand brushed the blanket, the small embroidered compass she'd sewn on herself. I'll fix this, she whispered. I promise. Headlights cut through the rain. A black sedan pulled up slowly, too polished for neighborhood. The back window rolled down. Ava Hart, a man's voice called. Her heart jumped. She pulled Noah closer. Who's asking? She said. The passenger door opened. An older man stepped out beneath a wide umbrella, his posture straight, his suit immaculate despite the rain. He walked toward her and angled the umbrella over her and the baby first. My name is Grant Holloway, he said. I represent the estate of Dominic Hart. Ava stared at him. I don't know anyone by that name. Grant studied her carefully. I believe you do, he said gently. You just never met him. She shook her head. My father left before I was born. Yes, Grant said. And 3 days ago he died. The world tilted. Grant continued calmly. Dominic Hart was the sole owner of Hartwell Dominion. His estate is valued at approximately $1.2 billion. Ava laughed once, hollow and broken. You have the wrong person. Grant held out a sealed folder. You're his only heir. Ava stared at the rain-soaked street. The bus stopped, her crying newborn, the envelope of cash in her pocket. Her phone buzzed, 1% battery. Grant met her eyes. You don't have to decide anything tonight, he said. But you and your son shouldn't be here. Ava looked down at Noah, then back at the dark street. Leading toward the house she had just been thrown out of, for the first time since the door slammed shut, she stood up straight. Okay, she said quietly. Grant opened the car door. Ava stepped inside, unaware that the man who had just thrown her into the rain was about to learn what real loss felt like. The car smelled like leather and quiet money. Ava noticed at the moment the door closed behind her, sealing out the rain and the noise of the street. The silence inside wasn't empty. It was engineered. Thick glass, insulated panels. The kind of silence designed to make decisions without interruption. Noah settled almost immediately, the hum of the engine and the warmth calming him in a way Ava hadn't managed since leaving the hospital. She sat stiffly at first, hands still wrapped around the carrier handle. Her body braced as if the ground might fall away again. The adrenaline that had carried her from the house to the bus stop was draining fast, leaving behind a deep, bone-level exhaustion. Her stitches throbbed in slow pulses now, reminding her that survival still had a physical cost. Grant Holloway didn't speak right away. He didn't ask questions. He didn't explain himself further. He waited, hands folded loosely in his lap, eyes forward, giving her the rare courtesy of time. The car pulled away from Elm Street and merged onto the arterial roads heading north. Streetlights blurred past the windows like muted stars. After several minutes, Ava finally broke the silence. "You said he was my father," she said. Her voice sounded distant to her own ears, like it belonged to someone else. "Dominic Hart." "Yes," Grant replied evenly. "And he left everything?" She didn't know how else to phrase it. The word everything felt absurdly large. "Yes." Ava let out a breath that trembled despite her effort to control it. "Why now?" she asked. "Why show up like this?" Grant glanced at her briefly, then back to the road ahead. "Because it will require confirmation of your identity and circumstances before execution," he said. "Your father believed hardship clarified intent." Ava closed her eyes. "That's convenient," she said quietly. "Hardship always seems to clarify intent for the people who aren't living it." Grant didn't disagree. Dominic Hart was not a sentimental man, he said. He believed money distorted relationships unless introduced at the correct moment. Ava almost laughed again, but stopped herself. "He introduced it pretty late," she said. "Yes," Grant replied. "He did." They drove in silence again. Ava stared out the window at familiar Seattle landmarks sliding past, gas stations, late-night diners, bridges slick with rain. This was a city where she'd built her life carefully, step by step, where she'd learned to budget, negotiate, survive, where she believed, foolishly, that stability came from loyalty. The car turned onto a quieter street near the waterfront. Ava's phone vibrated weakly in her pocket and then went dark entirely. Grant noticed. "You'll have full access to secure communication shortly," he said. "For now, discretion is important." "Discretion from who?" Ava asked. Grant paused. "From anyone who believes your vulnerability gives them leverage." Ava thought of Tanner immediately. His calm voice, his check watch, the way he'd spoken about custody like it was a transaction. She nodded once. The car pulled into an underground garage beneath a high-rise hotel near Pike Place. The entrance was private, hidden behind a retractable steel gate. Grant exited first, opening Ava's door and extending his hand, not to help her stand, but to steady her. Inside, the hotel was hushed, the kind of quiet reserved for people whose problems were handled elsewhere. Grant led her through a private elevator and down a corridor carpeted, so thick her footsteps disappeared. The suite was larger than Ava's entire rented house. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Elliott Bay, the city lights reflecting off the water like scattered gold. Soft lamps cast warm pools of light across polished wood and neutral-tone furniture. Everything smelled faintly of citrus and linen. Ava stood in the entryway, stunned. "You can rest here tonight," Grant said. "A physician is on call to check your incision and the baby. Supplies have already been arranged." Ava's knees almost gave out, not from emotion, but from relief so sudden it felt dangerous. She lowered the carrier onto the couch carefully and sat beside it, one hand resting on Noah's chest. Her body sagged as if it had been waiting hours for permission to stop holding itself together. Grant placed a small folder on the table. "You don't need to read anything tonight," he said. "But when you're ready, this contains a summary of the state." Ava didn't reach for it. "Does anyone know?" she asked instead. Grant shook his head. "Not yet. The board believes the state is in transition. No successor has been announced." Ava's gaze sharpened. "What board?" Grant met her eyes. "Hartwell Dominion owns several holding companies," he said, "one of which controls Apex Holdings." The words landed slowly. Ava's breath hitched. "Apex," she repeated. "Yes." Her mind snapped back to Tanner's pride-filled voice. The Apex meeting. The future he said he needed sleep for. Ava looked down at Noah, then back at Grant. "So, Tanner works for a company owned by my father." "Indirectly," Grant said. "Yes." Ava didn't smile. She didn't react outwardly at all. Something colder, more precise took shape behind her eyes. Grant watched her carefully. "I want to be clear," he said. "Nothing changes unless you choose it to." Ava nodded slowly. "Good," she said, "because I'm not choosing anything tonight." The doctor arrived quietly an hour later, efficient and discreet. He examined Ava's incision, checked Noah's vitals, and left instructions that bordered on orders. Ava barely registered it. She was floating in a strange in-between space where her old life felt unreal, and the new one hadn't fully materialized yet. Afterward, she showered for the first time since leaving the hospital. The water was hot, steady, forgiving. She cried then, not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to release the pressure in her chest. She slept for 4 uninterrupted hours. When Ava woke, it was morning. Pale light filled the room, the city unfolding below like a promise she hadn't yet decided whether to trust. Noah stirred softly, his cries small and insistent. Ava fed him, watching the way his fingers curled instinctively around her thumb. That simple grip anchored her more than any inheritance could. Grant was waiting in the sitting area when she emerged, dressed now in a robe the hotel had provided. "Good morning, Miss Hart," he said. She hesitated. "I'm married," she said automatically. Grant inclined his head. "For now," he replied. Ava took a breath. "What happens next?" Grant gestured toward the folder. "If you accept the inheritance, we begin transition. Quietly, strategically. You will not appear publicly yet." Ava walked to the window, looking down at the city. Somewhere out there, Tanner was probably rehearsing his pitch, believing his life was accelerating upward. "Does he know?" she asked. "No," Grant said. "As of now, he believes you are homeless." Ava's reflection stared back at her in the glass. Pale, exhausted, but no longer panicked. "Good," she said. "Let's keep it that way." Grant studied her for a moment, then nodded. "As you wish." Ava rested her hand on the glass. She didn't feel triumphant. She felt focused. The night before, she had been thrown into the rain like a burden someone no longer wanted to carry. This morning, she stood above the city with her child in her arms, an empire waiting, silent, sealed, and unaware. And for the first time, Ava understood something clearly. This wasn't about revenge. This was about control. The first thing Ava learned was how to disappear without vanishing. Grant Holloway explained it to her on the third morning, standing near the window of the suite while the city below moved like a system that didn't know she existed yet. "Visibility is power," he said calmly, "but premature visibility is weakness." Ava listened while feeding Noah, her movements careful, deliberate. Her body still ached, but the pain was receding into something manageable. She had slept, really slept, for the first time since the pregnancy began. That alone changed the way she processed information. "What does disappearing look like?" she asked. "It looks like silence," Grant replied. "No announcements. No social media. No legal filings in your name yet. You don't correct narratives. You let people commit to them." Ava understood that instinctively. Tanner had always rushed to correct people, to assert, to dominate conversations before anyone questioned him. Silence had never been his language. Grant slid a tablet across the table. On it was a clean organizational diagram, lines and boxes arranged with elegant simplicity. Hartwell Dominion at the top. Beneath it, several holding companies. Beneath one of those, Apex Holdings. Ava didn't touch the screen at first. She didn't need to. She already knew where Tanner was standing. "So if I accept," she said, "nothing changes immediately." "Correct," Grant said. "The board expects uncertainty." Dominic Hart cultivated that expectation deliberately. It buys you time. Ava looked down at Noah, asleep now, his small chest rising and falling. Time was the one thing she hadn't been given the night Tanner kicked her out. It felt strange to hold it now. She nodded. "Then we take the time." Grant inclined his head. "I'll begin preparing the infrastructure, advisors, compliance, security, quietly. And legally?" Ava asked. Grant's expression tightened slightly. "That's where it becomes important that you remain underestimated." Ava's mouth curved just a fraction. "I'm very good at that." Later that day, while Ava was learning how to swaddle Noah without waking him, Tanner Cross was standing in front of a mirror in his office, adjusting his tie. Rainier Logistics occupied 4 floors of a glass building south of downtown, close enough to the financial district to feel important, far enough to avoid the real power centers. Tanner liked that. It gave him the illusion of ascent without competition breathing directly down his neck. He had slept well, better than he had in weeks. With Ava gone, the house was quiet. Madison had stayed over, pleased, already arranging her things, as if she'd won something tangible. Tanner told himself the guilt he felt was just old habit dying hard. This was necessary, he believed. Strategic. He checked his reflection again. Italian will suit borrowed confidence. He looked like the version of himself he'd always imagined he was becoming. His phone buzzed. A message from his manager confirming the Apex pitch schedule. Tanner smiled. This was it. The moment where everything aligned. The meeting that justified every decision he'd made, including last night. He didn't think about Ava in the rain. He didn't think about Noah crying. Those details were emotional clutter. He was focused on scale now. At the hotel suite, Ava stood in front of a full-length mirror, while a woman named Elaine adjusted the hem of a tailored blazer. Elaine was an image consultant Grant had brought in quietly. No entourage, no fanfare. We're not changing who you are, Elaine said. We're clarifying it. Ava studied her reflection. She didn't look like someone who had slept at a bus stop 2 nights ago. She looked composed, not glamorous, not intimidating, just certain. I don't want to look rich, Ava said. Elaine nodded approvingly. Good. Rich looks insecure. You want to look inevitable. Grant observed from the corner, silent. Between fittings and feedings, Ava learned the structure of her father's empire. Dominic Hart hadn't built with flair. He'd built with redundancy. His companies owned companies that owned leverage. The kind of structure that made failure almost impossible unless someone was reckless. Ava recognized it immediately. It's risk management, she said, tracing the flow of capital on the tablet, but also punishment. Grant's brow lifted. Explain. You don't destroy opponents, Ava said. You starve them. You let them fail in public while believing it's their own fault. Grant smiled faintly. Your father would have appreciated that assessment. Ava didn't respond. She wasn't interested in impressing a dead man. That evening, her phone buzzed again, this time from an unknown number. She stared at it until the voicemail icon appeared. She didn't listen. Instead, she handed the phone to Grant. That would be Tanner, Grant said after a brief glance at the number. Ava exhaled slowly. He wants to negotiate. Grant shook his head. He wants control. There's a difference. Do we answer? Ava asked. No, Grant said simply. Not yet. Across the city, Tanner paced his living room. Phone pressed his ear as voicemail picked up again. Just answer, he muttered. We need to discuss logistics. Madison watched him from the couch, irritation flickering across her face. Why do you even care? She asked. She's gone. Tanner snapped the phone down. Because she's being difficult. Madison rolled her eyes. She has nothing. What's she going to do? Tanner hesitated. That question, what is she going to do? Lodge somewhere uncomfortable. He didn't have an answer. He had assumed Ava would fold. Cry. Call him back begging. Silence wasn't part of the plan. At the suite, Ava rocked Noah gently, humming without realizing it. The melody was something her mother used to sing when money was tight and fear was louder than hope. Grant stood near the window again. There's something else, he said. Your husband filed electronically this afternoon. Ava didn't look up. Divorce? Yes, Grant replied. And full custody. He's claiming instability. Ava's hand stilled on Noah's back. Grant continued, voice even. He's arguing that you're unemployed, homeless, and recovering from surgery. He's positioning himself as a stable parent. Ava closed her eyes briefly. Does he know where I am? She asked. No. Ava opened her eyes. They were clear. Good, she said. Let him build the narrative. Grant watched her carefully. You understand that when you enter this arena, you won't just be correcting him. You'll be ending him. Ava looked down at her son. He ended himself the moment he threw a newborn into the rain, she said quietly. I'm just not going to stop him. That night, Ava signed the acceptance papers. Not with ceremony, not with hesitation. Just a steady hand and a calm breath. The empire changed hands without a sound, and Tanner Cross slept, unaware that the company he believed would elevate him had already shifted beneath his feet. Tanner Cross walked into the Apex building believing he was early. The lobby was already busy, but that didn't unsettle him. People like Tanner were accustomed to movement around them. He took it as confirmation that important things were happening in places he was finally allowed to enter. The glass walls rose high above polished stone floors, the Apex logo mounted behind the reception desk in brushed steel, minimal, expensive, restrained. He checked his watch again. 15 minutes to spare. Good. He liked being early. It gave him time to breathe, to rehearse confidence in silence, to imagine a version of himself who left these meetings with something irrevocable in his pocket. A receptionist glanced up as he approached. Her smile was polite, professional, but cooler than he expected. Name? She asked. Tanner Cross, he said. Rainier Logistics. I'm here for the strategic partnership pitch. She tapped at her screen longer than necessary. One moment, she said. Tanner waited. He didn't notice the subtle thing at first. The way people nearby weren't looking at him. Not with curiosity. Not with interest. They were looking past him, toward the elevators, toward something else that seemed to matter more. The receptionist's expression changed almost imperceptibly. Not concern. Not confusion. Deference. Mr. Cross, she said, standing now, please take a seat. Someone will be with you shortly. That was new. Usually he was escorted. Today, he was seated. Tanner told himself not to overthink it. Big companies ran on protocols. Protocols changed. He took a chair and crossed one leg over the other, pulling his portfolio onto his lap. He reviewed his notes, the familiar talking points about efficiency and scale. He knew this material cold. He'd built his confidence on preparation. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. The room around him emptied and refilled twice. People came and went. Some glanced at him briefly, then looked away. One man in a tailored gray suit paused near the window, spoke quietly into his phone, then glanced at Tanner with something that looked suspiciously like curiosity. Tanner's phone buzzed. A message from his manager. Stay sharp. Things are shifting. Tanner frowned. Shifting how? Before he could reply, a woman approached him. Not the receptionist, but a different one. Older, senior. Her posture alone signaled authority. Mr. Cross, she said. This way. Relief loosened his shoulders. He stood quickly and followed her down a corridor lined with framed abstracts, art chosen not to impress, but to imply taste. They entered a conference room larger than Tanner expected, floor-to-ceiling windows, a long table already occupied by people he recognized from emails and internal memos, executives, legal counsel, one board observer. No empty chair waited for him at the head of the table. Instead, the woman gestured to a seat halfway down. Tanner hesitated just a fraction of a second. Then he sat. The meeting began without introduction. A man at the far end of the table cleared his throat. Before we proceed, he said, we need to address structural updates within Hartwell Dominion. Tanner's pulse jumped. Hartwell Dominion. That wasn't on the agenda he'd been sent. The man continued, as of this week, the state transition has been finalized. Tanner leaned forward slightly. I'm sorry, he said, forcing a polite smile. I'm not sure how that relates to Rainier's. It relates, the man said calmly, because Apex Holdings is a subsidiary of Hartwell Dominion. The room stayed quiet. Tanner felt heat rise in his neck. He nodded slowly, pretending comprehension. Of course, he said, but my understanding was... That understanding is outdated. Another voice interjected, a woman seated closer to the windows, her tone crisp, unyielding. Ownership structure has changed. Tanner glanced around the table, searching for confirmation, for support, for anyone to meet his eyes. No one did. The first man spoke again. We'll be pausing all non-essential partnership expansions until a new controlling interest establishes strategic direction. Pausing. Tanner's grip tightened on his portfolio. Pausing, he echoed. With respect, we've invested months preparing for this alignment. Rainier Logistics is positioned to wait, the woman said, not unkindly, definitively, as everyone else is. Tanner swallowed. When can we expect guidance from a new controlling party? A brief silence followed. The man at the head of the table folded his hands. That information isn't public yet. Tanner forced a smile. Then who exactly are we waiting on? The answer came from the far end of the room, delivered by a voice Tanner hadn't noticed until now. Someone who values discretion. The speaker hadn't spoken until this moment. He was seated slightly apart from the others, posture relaxed, expression neutral. Grant Holloway. Tanner blinked. I don't believe we've met, Tanner said cautiously. Grant met his eyes without recognition. No, he said. We haven't. The meeting ended not with dismissal, but with dispersal. People stood, gathered their things, left in clusters that did not include Tanner. He remained seated for several seconds after the room emptied, staring at the city below through the glass. His phone buzzed again. Another message from his manager. Meeting went sideways. We'll talk. Tanner stood slowly. Something was wrong. He could feel it, not panic yet, but imbalance. The sense that gravity had shifted, and he hadn't adjusted his footing in time. Back at the hotel suite, Ava stood by the window, Noah asleep against her shoulder. Grant stood behind her, hands clasped loosely. He looked confident. Ava said quietly, when he walked in, Yes, Grant replied. That was important. Ava didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply nodded. What happens next? She asked. Grant considered her carefully. He'll try to regain footing. He'll seek explanations. He'll call people who suddenly won't return his calls. In custody? Ava asked. Grant's expression hardened. That will not proceed as he expects. Ava turned from the window. I don't want him destroyed yet, she said. Grant inclined his head. Of course. I want him to understand first, Ava continued. I want him to realize the ground is moving, that the rules changed, that the certainty he had was borrowed. Grant's mouth curved slightly. That takes time. I have time, Ava said. Across the city, Tanner sat alone in his office long after everyone else had left, staring at his phone as unanswered emails stacked up. For the first time since the night he slammed the door, a thin crack of doubt split his certainty. He didn't know why. He only knew that something powerful had shifted, and it had not shifted in his favor. The first thing Tanner lost was not money. It was certainty. He felt it the morning after the Apex meeting. Standing in front of his bathroom mirror, tie knotted perfectly, posture rehearsed, expression composed. Yet something refused to settle. The reflection stared back with a hesitation he didn't recognize. Not fear. Something more corrosive. Doubt. He checked his email before leaving for work. Nothing. No follow-up from Apex. No clarification. No reassurance. Just silence. Tanner told himself this was normal. High-level negotiations required patience. He had always preached that to others. Still, the quiet pressed against him in a way that felt personal. At Rainier Logistics, conversations stopped when he entered rooms. Not abruptly. That would have been obvious. Instead, voices softened. Meetings tightened. People glanced at their phones when he spoke, nodding too quickly, as if eager to move on. By noon, his manager finally called him in. The office smelled faintly of coffee and disinfectant. The blinds were half closed. Tanner noticed details like that now. How spaces communicated authority, without words. Sit, Mark said, gesturing to the chair opposite his desk. Tanner sat. Mark didn't smile. He didn't frown either. He wore the careful neutrality of someone delivering information they did not control. I'm getting pressure, Mark said. From above. Tanner leaned forward. Pressure how? Questions, Mark replied. About judgment. About optics. Tanner felt heat rise in his chest. Judgment? We followed protocol. Mark nodded slowly. That's what I said. And Tanner pressed. And they're not convinced, Mark said. Apex went silent. That doesn't happen without a reason. Tanner's jaw tightened. So, what are you saying? I'm saying, Mark replied carefully, that until things stabilize, you're stepping back from client-facing initiatives. The words landed heavier than Tanner expected. Stepping back, he repeated. Temporarily, Mark added quickly. Just until... Until what? Tanner snapped before he could stop himself. Mark met his eyes. Until whoever's actually in charge decides. Tanner left the office with a hollow feeling spreading through his chest. That afternoon, he called 3 contacts he trusted. 2 didn't answer. 1 picked up, spoke for less than a minute, and ended the call with an excuse that didn't match the tone of his voice. By evening, Tanner was pacing his living room while Madison sat on the couch scrolling through her phone, her earlier excitement dulled by inconvenience. You've been like this all day, she said. What's going on? Nothing, Tanner replied too quickly. Madison looked up. You sure? Yes, he snapped. She raised an eyebrow. You don't sound sure. Tanner stopped pacing. This is temporary, he said. Big companies pause. That's how leverage works. Madison shrugged. Okay. But her tone had changed. Less admiration. More assessment. The next blow came 2 days later. The custody hearing was supposed to be procedural. Tanner's lawyer had assured him it would be straightforward. Ava was unemployed, recovering from surgery. No fixed residence on paper. The courtroom in King County was smaller than Tanner expected, less dramatic, more intimate, the kind of place where details mattered more than arguments. Ava wasn't there. That unsettled him immediately. Instead, Grant Holloway stood when the judge called the case. Calm, controlled, impeccably prepared. The judge listened. Tanner watched, stunned, as documentation slid across the bench. Medical records showing Ava's compliance and recovery, housing records indicating secure accommodation, financial affidavits sealed for privacy. Sealed. That word echoed in Tanner's mind. His lawyer leaned in and whispered. This wasn't disclosed. The judge looked up. Mr. Cross, she said, your petition describes instability, yet evidence suggests otherwise. Tanner opened his mouth, then closed it. He couldn't argue sealed information. The judge continued. Given the circumstances, temporary full custody will remain with the mother. Temporary. But the word felt permanent in Tanner's chest. Outside the courtroom, Madison didn't answer his texts. At work, Tanner's access badge failed a restricted floor he'd previously used without issue. Security apologized politely, but didn't override it. By the end of the week, the narrative had shifted. Not loudly, not publicly. Quietly, people stopped looping him into decisions. Emails excluded him by omission rather than rejection. His calendar thinned. He wasn't fired. That was worse. Because firing would have been a moment, a villain, a reason. This was erosion. Meanwhile, Ava's days found rhythm. She woke early, fed Noah, took slow walks along the waterfront when the weather allowed. She met with advisors Grant introduced carefully, people who spoke in probabilities, not promises. She listened more than she spoke. She learned which board members valued restraint, which executives feared volatility, which decisions Dominic Hart had delayed deliberately to test patience. She never mentioned Tanner. Grant noticed. You're not asking about him. Ava adjusted Noah's blanket. I don't need to, she said. I know where he is. Grant nodded. And where is that? Ava looked out over the water. Still thinking power comes from being loud. Grant said nothing. One evening, Ava received a message. From Tanner. We need to talk. Things are getting complicated. Ava read it once. She didn't respond. Grant watched her carefully. He's unraveling. I know, Ava said. You don't want to speak to him? Not yet. Why? Ava's answer was quiet. Because if I speak now, he'll still believe this is about us. Grant studied her. And it isn't? Ava shook her head slowly. It's about him realizing he was never in control. Across the city, Tanner sat alone in his office long after the lights had dimmed, staring at an unreadable spreadsheet. For the first time, the question he couldn't escape wasn't how to win. It was who was watching him fail. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday, not by email, not through Tanner's assistant. A physical envelope was delivered to his office. Thick paper, embossed seal, no return address. Just his name, typed neatly, no title attached. Tanner stared at it for a long time before opening it. Inside was a single card. Board briefing, mandatory attendance. Apex Holdings. Thursday, 9 a.m. No agenda. No sender. By then, Tanner had learned that silence carried more meaning than explanations. He accepted the meeting the way a man accepts a summons. Not because he wanted to, but because refusing felt dangerous. Thursday morning, the Apex building looked different to him. It hadn't changed. He had. The lobby felt colder. The reception desk farther away. He gave his name and was escorted without conversation. No small talk. No reassurance. The conference room was the same one as before. This time, every seat was filled. Executives, legal counsel, 2 board members he had only ever seen in internal newsletters. People whose authority didn't need performance. Tanner took the seat indicated for him, lower than last time. He noticed that immediately. Grant Holloway entered last. Tanner stiffened. The recognition hit him now, sharpened by anxiety and memory. He had seen this man before. At the bus stop. In the rain. Grant didn't look at him. Instead, he walked to the head of the table and stood there, hands resting lightly on the polished surface. "Thank you for attending," Grant said calmly. "This briefing will be brief." A screen behind him lit up. Hartwell Dominion. Tanner's pulse jumped. As of last week, Grant continued, the transition to controlling interest within Hartwell Dominion was completed. No one spoke. Given the scale of the estate, discretion was required. The successor elected to remain private until internal stability was confirmed. Tanner leaned forward slightly. "Who is the successor?" he asked. Grant turned his head for the first time and looked directly at him. "You've already met her," Grant said. The room stayed silent. A door at the side of the conference room opened. Ava Hart walked in. She wasn't dressed extravagantly. No jewelry beyond a simple watch. Her posture was straight, her movements unhurried. She carried no documents. She didn't need to. Tanner's breath caught, so sharply it felt like a physical blow. For a moment, his mind rejected what his eyes were seeing. This wasn't possible. This was a coincidence. This was theater. Then she met his eyes. No anger. No triumph. Just recognition. Ava took the empty seat at the head of the table, beside Grant. "This is Ava Hart," Grant said evenly, "controlling owner of Hartwell Dominion." The words settled into the room like weight. Tanner's hands trembled. He didn't notice at first. "That's not funny," he said, forcing a laugh that died halfway out his mouth. "This is some kind of mistake." Ava didn't respond. Grant did. Ms. Hart inherited the estate of Dominic Hart, her father, 3 days prior to your domestic incident. The phrase cut cleanly. Tanner's mouth opened. Closed. "No," he said. "That's impossible. Her father was..." "A ghost," Ava said quietly. Her voice wasn't sharp. "It didn't need to be. That's what my mother told me, too." Tanner looked at her fully now. Really looked. She wasn't soaked in rain. She wasn't shaking. She wasn't pleading. She was composed. "You threw me and our newborn out of our home the night my father died," she continued, her tone factual. "You did it believing I had nothing." Tanner stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. "This is a setup," he said, panic breaking through his control. "You planned this." Ava shook her head once. "No," she said. "You did." Grant raised a hand slightly. "Mr. Cross, please sit." Tanner didn't. He couldn't. "You knew," Tanner said, staring at Ava. "You knew and you didn't say anything." Ava met his gaze steadily. "I didn't know until after you shut the door," she said. "But even if I had, what would that have changed?" The question hung in the air. Tanner's chest tightened. "You would have stayed," he said hoarsely. Ava's eyes softened. not with forgiveness, but with clarity. Exactly. The board chair cleared his throat. Mr. Cross, given the conflict of interest in your recent conduct, Rainier Logistics Partnership consideration with Apex is formally withdrawn. Tanner barely heard him. You let me fall, he whispered. Ava didn't deny it. I let you continue, she said. Silence followed. Grant slid a document across the table toward Tanner. This outlines a termination of your consulting access, effective immediately. Tanner stared at the paper, without touching it. What about custody? He asked suddenly, desperation breaking through pride. You can't. Ava stood. The movement was subtle, but the effect was absolute. You filed for custody claiming I was unstable, she said. That filing will be revisited in light of your financial misrepresentations and professional conduct. Tanner's breath stuttered. I didn't know, he said. I swear I didn't know. Ava looked at him for a long moment. I know, she said. That was worse, because it meant the punishment wasn't based on ignorance. It was based on character. The meeting ended without ceremony. No guards escorted Tanner out. No raised voices followed him. He walked out alone. Outside, the city moved on as if nothing had happened. By evening, his access badges were deactivated. His phone calls went unanswered. Madison's things were gone from the house when he returned, her absence explained by a single text. I didn't sign up for this. Tanner sat on the edge of the bed that night, staring at the wall, replaying the moment Ava walked into the room. Not as his wife, not as a victim, but as the authority he had dismissed. He realized then that the worst part wasn't losing money. It was understanding, too late, that the only moment that mattered, the moment that defined everything, had been the night he chose cruelty over restraint. Across the city, Ava stood by the window of her new home, Noah asleep against her chest. The city lights reflected softly in the glass. Grant approached quietly. It's done. Ava nodded. No, she said. It's finished. She didn't smile. She turned away from the window, carried her son down the hallway, and closed the door behind her. Life continued. Justice didn't announce itself. It simply arrived and stayed.